So thank you for coming this afternoon. I want to thank the City Council for their actions this afternoon in passing this agreement, which is no longer a tentative agreement, but is an agreement between the city and our police officers. I want to thank particularly President Harrell and Councilmember Gonzalez for their work in leading the passage of this. I have to give some note to Councilmember Gonzalez in particular, not just for her work on this passage today, but really for her work in this community over decades on civil rights and representing communities and bringing their voice to the table, working on all. We served together on an oversight panel on SPD a number of years ago, and seeing her work continuing to make sure that we have the strongest accountability possible, but also make sure that our police officers have the tools they need and the pay they deserve to do the jobs we ask them to do. Today is a very strong step forward for public safety, for fairness for our officers, and for police reform and accountability. I'm very grateful to the City Council for passing this agreement. I'm also grateful for all those members of the community who came today and had their voices heard. We need people engaged in this city on all the critical issues. We heard you, and we will go forward. I was fortunate over the weekend to do a walking tour with the chief to West Seattle, where I've heard in West Seattle, as I've heard throughout this city, very strong support for our police officers and wanting to make sure that we pay them fairly. It was not fair for us to pay our officers 2014 wages in a 2018 Seattle. We have asked our officers to do very, very deep reforms and hard work for many years. As U.S. Attorney, when we put the consent decree in place, many people said our officers could not rise to the task. I disagreed then, and they've proved I was right. They have done everything that we've asked them to do. They did it without a contract, and they did it in a way that one of the toughest federal judges in the country found we were in full and effective compliance. So today we move forward again to say, we know that we have to be able to have our officers treated fairly and paid fairly. There was no disagreement among that downstairs, and I was glad to see that finally, after 4 years, we have a contract with the men and women who work for the police department. I'm also very heartened by people who, I think this was a real vote of confidence in our chief of police. People know that Carmen Best has her heart and soul in making sure that we have the best, most accountable, community-based police force anywhere in the country. She'll say some words, but let me tell you, having worked with her now for a period of years as mayor and as her the chief of police, there's no one in this city more committed to police reforms and having the highest caliber officers than Carmen Best. I will also tell you that I am steadfastly committed to police reforms. I have been involved personally in police reforms since the mid-1990s in this town, serving on the Sentencing Guidelines Review Board, sitting on 3 oversight committees on the police department, being the first citizen observer to the Firearms Review Board. I believe strongly in police reforms, and I was proud as U.S. Attorney to make sure that we got a consent decree in place that would reform our police department. We are well on our way. We know that this agreement does not roll back reforms. And I want everybody in the community to know the chief and I are committed to reforms, our police officers are committed to reforms, our city council is committed to reforms. And this contract is a step forward on many critical reforms we need to take that next best steps. So I want everyone to know there will be full implementation of body-worn video. We will have the Inspector General's office be a vibrant office that has full and unfettered access to records so that we have that accountability prong built strongly when we're found in compliance and no longer are under jurisdiction of the federal court. We will make sure that the 180-day rule, that if there's an officer who violates because of a bias crime or because of a significant force, we can recalculate it. So unlike what people heard today, the case we had before where Chief O'Toole fired a police officer and they were reinstated, that cannot happen under this contract. I want to thank the Seattle Police Officers Guild for the long negotiations we had over a period of months. It took time to rebuild trust at the table because trust over a period of years had been broken. We rebuilt that trust, and now we know today, we heard the voices. We want community to know. We will rebuild trust and value with you as well. Every encounter with a police officer either adds to trust or subtracts from it. And we know, we've heard the voices, that still there's a lot of people who want to make sure that we have the best and most accountable police department in this country. We will continue to have that. I want to say personally, I value the CPC and all those, including Not This Time, who spoke with concerns about this contract. We heard you too. And we believe that we got the most significant reforms by agreement. We will continue at the bargaining table. We will continue with the Inspector General to see what's not working. We will continue our dialogue with the police officers and the Police Officers Guild. Reform is not a destination. Reform must be continuous if we want to have the police department that the Seattle deserves. I think this contract gives us the best avenue to get that, and I'm very, very thankful the City Council passed this, that we can move forward, paying our police officers and getting and keeping the best police officers possible. With that, Chief, I think you want to say a few words too.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. Good evening. First of all, I just want to thank the community that came out this evening and supported the police department. And I also want to thank those who came forward with their concerns. Let me just be clear. We are absolutely committed to reforms. We are going to make sure that we have a culture of continuous improvement and innovations, and we will be relentless in making sure that we have a reformed police department. I also want to thank the mayor for helping usher through this contract. As she noted earlier, it had come to an impasse, and we weren't moving forward, and because of her great leadership, we were able to usher the contract through. And then I want to thank our City Council, Councilmember Gonzalez, Councilmember Harold in particular, for their words of support and in signaling through their vote that they do support the Seattle Police Department and the men and women who work hard on the department every single day. And lastly, but not leastly, I want to thank the men and women of the Seattle Police Department who are on the front lines every day facing poverty, mental health problems, crisis, and tragedy, and all of the unpredictability that is inherent in the profession of policing, and doing so under intense scrutiny every day, day in and day out. They have worked really hard. They deserve to have fair wages and compensation, and this vote today signals to them and to all of us that they're respected and that they deserve to have a contract. And I couldn't be more happy about that outcome. Thank you.
We'll take any questions if there are any.
Madam Mayor, is there something tangible? Is there a tangible change or policy or event that you can offer those who have been so mistrustful and so worried that this means a rollback in reform?
Yeah, I can give 3 examples. There was a big discussion over whether we should have body-worn video in a fight. And the CPC itself was skeptical of that, and actually the party that weighed in against it because of the privacy concerns, which I share. But we now have rolled that out as a pilot, and we know that body-worn video can be a great tool of accountability. It protects both the community and officers if we make sure we protect privacy in the right ways. We will be able to continue that. That will no longer be subject to litigation. Officers will wear the body-worn video, and we will continue to set the mark for the country on how to have body-worn video and privacy with public disclosure. The Office of Public Accountability, Police Accountability, OPA, the police has now agreed that they can have civilians in positions that only rank and file could have before. Community was concerned because they said, how can we trust police to govern police? And so the police sat down and said, we think they can, but we understand why it's an issue. So they agreed that we can now have more civilians in OPA. We also got in place the Inspector General, which is a new office. In order for the Inspector General to do their job, they got to get access to the records. Well, under the governing law and the contract, they weren't allowed to do that unless there was an agreement. With this agreement, the Inspector General's office now will be in place and provide that critical oversight and auditing function. So we'll make sure that if any parts of the contract aren't working like they're supposed to have, the Inspector General is going to tell us about it and hold us accountable. So there's a number of really important reforms that will move forward because of this contract. Probably the most significant reforms that were passed. Now there's questions about how some of it will operate. I want to emphasize here, we all know we have to go back to the federal judge. Judge Robart made it clear, not just with this contract, but remember, Judge Robart has not approved the accountability legislation. He said he wanted to see how it all worked with bargaining. We know we've got to go back to the federal judge. We've got to talk to the Department of Justice and the monitor to show them that this contract not only meets the terms of the consent decree, but it goes beyond the consent decree. It increases and continues reforms, which is what we want to do. So those are three really tangible things that will make a difference in accountability for police officers. And at the same time, those police officers know they're going to be paid fairly, and they're going to be valued by our city, which I think is a really important signal to send, that we know our police officers are doing a much tougher job. If you look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of events last year where police were called into crisis intervention, their job is changing. We had more of those than ever before. But yet, despite those thousands of events, force was used less than 2% of the time. And when it was used, it was almost always the least amount of force that was necessary. That is completely different than when we started the consent decree. So what we're doing is working. What we've asked officers to do is working. And today we tell them we value your work, we want you here, we support you as a community.
Chief Best, money was obviously a concern, and officers want a raise. They haven't had a raise in several years. But it's more than that to some officers who just feel like the city doesn't respect them. Like from the top down, there has been, maybe not now, but over the years, a lack of respect shown towards law enforcement from people who used to sit on the 7th floor of City Hall to people downstairs. Sure. So for those officers who would still consider leaving, even despite the money they're going to get, what would you say to them?
Well, the vote today clearly shows that the council is supporting the officers and cares about the work that they're doing. And honestly, Brandy, we are moving forward, looking ahead to continuously innovating and making sure that we have a culture where the officers are doing the work and the community is showing that they support them. There were several community members in that audience, even today, very much in support of the officers. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, when we were in West Seattle yesterday, the vast majority, I will say almost everybody we talked to, wants to see more officers, supports the officers, and supports the police department. And I feel very confident in that. And actually, I am going to carry that message forward to our rank and file because it's very important that they hear it.
Could I ask Mr. Stuckey to address that as well?
Well, I think that the chief already expressed that, but if you looked at not just the fact that the contract was ratified, let me say thank you to both Councilwoman Gonzalez and Councilman Harrell, as well as our chief executive, Mayor. We thank you for that. But for me, what I got out of that mostly was the people who actually got up to the mic, the people who expressed, even those who weren't excited about the fact that we had a contract and felt like we shouldn't ratify it. The fact that you have people in your community that involved is not something you want to throw away. That's something you want to embrace. And I would say to an officer who felt like maybe I still want to leave, if you felt like people didn't care about you, all you had to do was look at any of the footage that you saw today about the passion people have speaking out for officers.
And Chief Best, on the pay front, what does this mean for recruitment and retention? How much of a change will this be, and how quickly?
Well, it's hard to be predictive, but certainly the fact that we finally have competitive wages, if this, once this is ratified and through, is going to make a difference for us. We have had difficulty. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody in recruiting people because we don't have or didn't have competitive wages for the officers, and it's really difficult to recruit in that environment. So I'm very grateful that we will have competitive wages. It will help us bring people into the organization, along with the support that we're feeling from the community. I think we're on the trajectory to a really positive outcome.
Chief Best, so just to follow up on that, we heard Reverend Walden downstairs say she wants officers to be paid and receive their money by Christmas. Do you have a timeline on when they can start seeing this, when this could be ratified?
I actually don't have the timeline about the money piece of that. Maybe the mayor or somebody else can answer that piece. I don't know.
I'm good with Christmas.
I think that because this legislation is so important, because it promotes public safety, it increases reform, and pays our officers fairly, I plan on signing it tomorrow. Because of the way the contract is structured, it goes into effect January, I believe.
Councilmember Gonzalez may know more specifics. I don't know. She's a little more granular in some of this.
Yeah.
The details person. I would just say that Because the back pay is so significant in this instance, we are actually having to build a payroll system that will be able to sustain the payments of the back pay. So it's anticipated that that system will be up and running by February of 2019. So we can expect to begin seeing payment of the back pay issues and the forward pay issues beginning February of 2019.
Christmas in February. We have been building a reserve, and if, assuming the council passes that part of my budget, which passing the day and the appropriation is made, that we've reserved for that money. We saw it coming, and so in building the budget this year, we not only took the reserves, but I also took from other places to make sure that we could support this contract. So the money is already set aside.
Mayor and Chief, can you say, this walking tour in West Seattle yesterday, Lisa Verbal was one of the council members kind of on the fence, that's her district, was that to send a message to her? Are you willing to be blunt or honest about that?
Look, I've made it really, I've been in every part of this city, and the chief has been in every part of this city, and we want people to be heard. And if we think that there's an important point to be made or time to be heard, I think that the people of West Seattle needed to be heard on this issue. And I think that Council member Herbold said today she heard them. And I think that's important. I will continue, you know, I'm the mayor for the whole city. I don't have a district. My district ranges, you know, every corner, and I've been in every corner. And I will tell you, there has been no meeting that I have been in that people haven't said that they're concerned about public safety. And if you're concerned about public safety, we needed this contract. And we needed it both to make sure that we had police officers who could do the job, but also we have to keep moving forward on reforms. I am steadfastly committed. I have been working on police reforms in this city for decades, and I am not going to stop now. And without this contract, we would have been set back on reform. Make no mistake about it. This is a step forward for reform, and it's a step forward for our officers in public safety. Thank you very much.